Tim, we've gotten there. What are we talking about today? What sucks? What sucks in the world of business?
I thought you were going to say the world of sports, and I was going to say the New York Jets. But anyway,
So yeah, the New York Jets suck. And that's a pure lack of leadership at the top. A meddling leader who feels like they just have to be involved in everything from day-to-day operations to what's going on in the field to all of that other kind of stuff. And I would tell you this, if you are a leader who is listening to this podcast and think that your leadership capability is demonstrated by how you engage and touch the day-to-day work that your team is doing, you're fucking doing it wrong.
There you go. That's right.
All right, podcast over.
Yeah. It was good seeing you. And I mean, I got to have a moment of self-awareness. I just said this to you while I'm wearing a Seattle Mariners hoodie. So, I mean, it's not like I'm in, paradise with my choice of sports teams either. But let's, you know what? You're right. We could end the podcast now, or we could continue on this thread. What do people, not people, what do certain businesses suck at? Here's what I see a lot of times. I talk to business owners and they say, you know what? We just can't hire right. Or they say, like, this is an area that you've worked in before. Like, how do we grow our business? They get stuck. Like their wheels start spinning. They have endless meetings, stupid meetings, countless meetings, useless meetings. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. They get stuck. And I see a lot of people getting stuck in hiring and people and sales in how do I get my marketing fixed? Like, how many companies have big enough budgets to hire a full-time marketing person and they outsource it, right? Because they're the experts and that's what they do. How do you implement new technology? What technology is good? I had a guy reach out to me last night and say, do you know of any good software platforms for performance management? I had to talk to him about that. Yeah. And they just don't know. They know they want to fix a problem. They don't know how to fix the problem. And a lot of times it's highly specialized problems like these. What do you say?
It used to be the beginning of the podcast. It was about finding your catalyst. I don't do an intro anymore, but we all have problems we're looking to solve. We don't know where to start. We don't know how to solve them. We're looking for that catalyst, that nudge to start doing the thing that we want to do better and faster. And it's through conversations like the ones that we'll have on this. And Tim and I are working on making this an ongoing thing where once a month, once every 6 weeks, we get together and share just a brief conversation, open conversation around either a leadership challenge that we're working through, a business challenge that we're working through, or we might even get into family at some point in time. But like leadership, business, family, self, they all relate to each other in one way, shape, or form because the common denominator is us. We're human beings. We're thinking about this stuff all the time. And then we find ways to detach, and those detached areas could be good, they could be bad. But anyhow, so Tim and I are going to do this a bit more, primarily tied to one of the things that we've partnered on that we're rolling out, which is a fractional leadership recruiting / matchmaking kind of thing. And we don't know exactly what we're going to call it or how that's going to go, but we're going to build in public as we go through it. So that's the context here. And Tim has laid out a couple of things that suck. Yeah, some people are not growing fast enough from a top line perspective. Some people are unable to keep up with the growth from a bottom line perspective. They bring it all in and they're not able to fulfill, and that ultimately creates some problems down the road. Some people spend a lot of time in meetings just wasting people's time. I'm a big believer of work doesn't really happen in meetings. Well, maybe one type of meeting, a collaborative meeting, there's where some work can get done, or at least some clarity can be captured. So we're going to hit on a couple of challenges. And one of the things I'll ask everyone to do here, call to action, direct call to action. If you have a business challenge or a leadership challenge that you're running into in your business or at home or for self, and you'd like to hear a Canadian who likes the Jets and an American who likes the Jets, different Jets, then ask us and we'll go into it. And if we can't answer the question between us in a conversation, then we will make sure that we bring on an expert who has some experience there to do it. So that's my commitment to you.
Yeah. So, and let's be clear. You are right. They're different Jets. One of them's in first place and one of them is, I don't know if they're in last place, but they're not in first place.
They're not in first place. No. And as Ricky Bobby said, if you're not first, you're last.
Exactly.
So what's a organization challenge or organization, depending on where you want to be. What's an organization challenge that just pisses you off, Tim?
Honestly, there's two that really grind my gears, right? The first is one that I solve, and the other one's one that I don't. Well, three things really, because sales and marketing are the same, is that, so watching how people try to hire, right? It's like, as somebody who works in that space, when you watch people try and they know better and all that stuff, it's frustrating. It's like, don't do that. And they do things that shoot themselves in the foot. And frankly, I'm a big believer that everything in your organization begins, right? Everything. The most important thing you do is you hire right, because everything starts with who walks the door. You can have the best product, you have the best policies, you have the best processes. You can have the shiniest thing in the world, and none of it matters if you do not have the right people to bring it to life. That's just all there is to it. And that's what matters, right? You need to have the right people to bring it to life. And watching people try to hire sometimes, or try to lead, and they don't know what they're doing, that's very, very frustrating. The other two things that really get me.
Well, hold on.
Go ahead.
Nope, we're not going to go into the other two things. And
okay.
You have to come back and listen to another podcast as we get into the other two things, because we're not just going to give it all up in one podcast. It's only 25 minutes. Only because I know I will ask some questions and potentially will ramble on in some of the things I say. So let's talk about the hiring.
Okay,
so
let's do it.
First, why do organizations struggle with hiring?
Oh man, you're right. We only have 25 minutes. Good point. There's many, 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 many reasons for it. The biggest one is that, the biggest one is that they don't interview properly, right? Like, you interview people based on experience, skills, and what really matters is, you need to have skills, sure. But what really matters is whether or not you're self-motivated to use them. Are you self-motivated to use those skills? And are you passionate with the job that you're hiring for? I mean, we're talking sports. How many times have we seen quarterbacks that are supposed to have all the skill in the world, but they just do not? It's because they either didn't have as much passion as we thought, they lose their passion, or their passion can't carry them to overcome the next hurdle, which is playing professional football, or they're not self-motivated, or a combination of both, right? And people don't hire right because they over-focus on their perception of that person's skill. And let me reiterate, their perception of that person's skill, not whether or not the skill exists. It is their perception that they have it.
Okay, so hold on. So let me.
Yeah, go.
This is a conversational podcast. It is not a soliloquy.
I guess.
Stop.
Yeah,
so
I got you.
All right. So in the context of a conversation while we're having a drink together, whatever that drink is, coffee, beer, bourbon, whatever.
I know each other well enough to know that it's bourbon if it's you and I. But go ahead.
It is. So so in the context, let's kind of break things down a little bit tighter. Mm-hmm. So you said one challenge is interviewing.
Yeah.
Another challenge that I've heard you say, without saying the word directly, is assessment. So there's an assessment challenge specifically around skill. And then the third challenge that you said is there are biases that we have relative to, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but preconceived notions around what someone's skill capability is. So there's there's bias, there's assessment, and there's interviewing. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start at assessment, because that, before you get to the interview, right, you get applications in, or you get, things in, and you misassess them. You get people's applications, you see their resumes, or CVs, as you may call them now, as we're talking about before. And you misassess them, right? You see, oh my God, I'm just looking for all these years of experience, right? And an experience in a specific industry, and you do not properly characterize what you're really looking for. Like, industry experience is not an indicator that you're going to have industry success again, or that you ever had it to begin with, right? It is not a predictor of future performance or future results. But so many times we see people, I want 10 years of experience in this. And then you're looking for that. And it's like, really? Like, is that what you really need or want? You really don't, right? Because experience, like I was just saying, doesn't predict performance or motivation to use the learnings from that experience. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And being involved in tech, like I've been for a number of years, and although I'm now focusing more on construction and manufacturing and oil and gas and some of these more kind of hands-on local type things. And we'll still do some tech to some extent, but being involved in tech, one of the challenges you run into is someone in HR puts together a job description for a role. And when they put together the job description for the role, they'll put things like 5 years of experience in X or 10 years of experience in Y.
Yeah.
And what will end up happening in that area is sometimes the programming languages that they're looking for experience in haven't existed that long, which just basically demonstrates that they have no fucking clue on how to hire for that role. And the point on this is don't create a job description in a vacuum. Don't use somebody else's template. Engage with people, understand what the specific needs are or jobs to be done inside the organization before you go out and start creating this job description or posting that you're going to share.
That's right. Exactly. And I see it all the time. It's like, and you're right. It's like I would like to say, I'd like to believe that what you have just provided is an extreme example that you don't see very often, but it's not. It's something you see all the right. Like, and we ask candidates to have a standard that we couldn't personally achieve. And not to mention, and I know you don't want me to make multiple points, but I am making multiple points. Not to mention, if we ever found somebody with this much experience for this job, they'd already have learned everything there is to learn about, and they'd be bored within a week. Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but that's just how I see it.
Well, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. You can be crazy and you can make a good point.
Fair.
So, all right. So we've got a challenge related to assessment. What are some things that people can do to get better at creating assessments that accurately reflect either the jobs to be done or skills that are needed in going through or building out their hiring process?
Well, look, like there's a few things that you can do, and I've seen skills assessments, but I think the biggest thing is that when you are reviewing applications or you're reviewing resumes, you don't necessarily need to look at, umpteen years of experience in a certain field, because again, as we just pointed out, sometimes this is not even real. But what you need to look at is, do they have experience or have they demonstrated use of the skill set needed for this job? And then from there, in your interviewing process, find out if they're actually motivated to use that skill set and passionate for the type of work they're going to have to do. Here's the best story that I have for that. So there was a time when I managed somewhere between 25 and 40 schedulers and dispatchers, logistics professionals, right? And I had somebody's resume. And if you think about it, if you're a dispatcher for an on-road operation, here's your skill set. You have to be super decisive, right? Like when things are happening, when things are unfolding, you have to make decisions. You must be decisive. There's no two ways about it. A bad decision is better than no decision in these situations. And you need to be decisive first and foremost, right? The second thing that you need to be is you need to have a good customer service focus. When stuff is happening on the road, you need to be singularly focused on fixing what's happening on the road. And you also need to be able to manage multiple issues, right? Multiple issues on the go at the same time. Can you manage them? Can you keep them clear in your head? And basically, long story long, I had a resume across my desk once for a position like this. And they were a chef, right, in a previous life. Well, what does a chef have to do? Well, they have to focus on their customers. They have a whole bunch of issues at once. Like if you think about all those tickets that they have to fill and all those orders they have to fill, they have to be decisive, right? Like that's all there is. And you have to lead and coordinate a group of people. So I remember I interviewed her and I had some pointed questions about that. Like why? No experience in transport and all this type of stuff. I interviewed her, found out that her motivation was through the roof. And sure enough, within about 3 days, everybody's asking me how I identified this person, because she had to be probably the best hire that she ever made, that we'd ever made, or she's a great hire, great team member, fit in well. And the mistake that we make in all this is when we're reviewing resumes, we say, but we have to have a high standard. And we don't realize that by by misinterpreting high standard with very specific and oftentimes unattainable experience, we actually have shot ourselves in the foot at finding the best hire, even though we think that we've narrowed it down a little bit, right? And we've actually shot ourselves in the foot because we've accidentally excluded people that could actually work at a higher standard than anybody that already has that experience.
I think it's funny that organizations talk about having a high standard, but when you ask them what their standard is, you get 10 different answers.
Yeah, they don't.
Depending on how many people you talk to. Yeah. So it's like we have a high standard, but we can't define what the standard is. So do we have a standard or do we not have a standard? So a couple of different things that came out there. One of the things that was really cool is you highlighted skills that people are applying in day-to-day work that would apply to the role that you're looking to fill. And there are a number of organizations out there who talk about wanting to innovate, wanting to create, wanting to do different things, be more entrepreneurial inside their organization, yet they wouldn't consider hiring a chef to apply their skills to this role. And if they did, they'd actually be shocked at what they see. And what you just described is a mom walking through a grocery store.
Totally.
You have to be decisive. You have to think about how you react to the service that you're going to be providing inside a given operating environment. And I get that I'm stretching here as we go through it. And you have to be able to handle multiple issues at the same time. And there are a lot of people that are out there who think, hey, I've been out of the workplace for so long, and now don't have skills to transfer into the job market. Why would I be employable or any of those other things? And I would tell you, you are operating a business in a different context. You are employable. Find leaders inside those organizations who are willing to take a chance, willing to think different so that they can do different and ultimately be different.
Like 100%. And I run in, and we use the example of the mom. I run into moms all the time that were staying at home and they get that mindset belief. And I tell you, no, you are a logistics professional at this point. You really are. Think about all those customer requests that you have to balance. Think about all those, you are really a logistics professional. And we overlook that all the time as employers. We limit ourselves, and I believe that, you see it all the time. There's not enough people to find the new jobs and all this stuff. There are. You're just not. You could find people if you're more open-minded. Let's put it that way.
All right. So we talk a little bit about assessment.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned hiring, one of the other hiring challenges and some of the interviewing that happens. What percentage of companies have you worked with who, when you started working with them the first time, could clearly articulate a hiring process that was repeatable and created predictable results? What percentage?
Nobody.
Just ballpark.
Nobody.
I got it. So hold on. What you're telling me is hiring is really important. We're struggling with hiring out there in the marketplace. We need to make sure we bring in good people. And yet we don't have a predictable process that achieves a certain set of results.
And you laugh because it sounds unbelievable, but it is unbelievable what's happening. Yeah. Mike, every company I've worked with has a different process, and it's often different every single time. And under the guise of saying, well, we have learned, we're doing it a little differently this time because we learned from the last time. What they have done is they are just telling themselves that they're doing that, but really they're just changing it every single time.
Well, that's not a process.
I guess
it's a making it up as they go along.
That's right.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is typically they don't have feedback loops put in place to determine if a specific segment inside the process is actually yielding the results that they're looking for.
Exactly. And the thing is that it's good to have processes, and it's good to test them, and it's good to, adjust them and learn more about them at times. Right. However, when you change it every time and you never actually had a process written down, assumed, or followed in the first place, you're not really doing that. Right.
So they're not mind mapping out the process?
Oh God, no.
They're not
No,
putting up on a whiteboard.
no. And my favorite, no, right. And Mike, who can they call if they want to put up on a whiteboard?
Yeah, I know
But,
a guy. I know a guy who's got a whiteboard, a couple of markers, a good camera, and
and he likes
a
chat,
sense of humor.
which is subjective. But anyways, no, I'm kidding. I'm teasing you. But like, no, but like my favorite is the companies that every time they do an interview or have a process, a hiring process, every single time there's a different group of people have to meet this person, and they descend into like a million times of having like a million interview process, because they just have to meet every single person that they might work with, to not to make sure if they are going to be good at the job, just to make sure they like them. But they use the term fit for like, right? And it's like, you're not objectively finding out if anybody can do anything for you here. You are just wasting everybody's time, including yours.
I wonder how many of those people really like the people they work with as it is.
Well, and last I checked, that's not the game here, right?
Well,
Like,
and I mean, I say it with a smile. Ideally, you work around people who you know, like, and trust. You can trust that they're going to do their job, that they know what their job is, that you know how you impact or influence their job, and we're all working together toward the same broader objective. Because when we look at our paycheck, or we get the email that says that payroll has hit or whatever, or we look at the email that we use to send out to somebody, we all have the same domain name at whatever. So whether it's at Find My Catalyst or Best Culture or at whatever, we all have that common thing. We have this uniform that we put on, and this thing that we represent, this name that we represent, this brand that we represent. And a lot of people will think about brand from an external perspective. And I've heard other folks talk about culture as brand looking inward. So we went through the hiring piece. We've got some challenges. One, you cannot expect to achieve predictable results if you do not have a process that you're following. And when you build your process, which is going to be an iterative thing, make sure you have data points that you can use to assess whether or not the process is working. And if it is not working, then you need to adjust it. If it is working, keep doing it and figure out other ways that you might be able to refine it. We talked about skills and assessing skills and some of the bias that might happen there, and the mistakes that we make. What is the third challenge? I should have written it down, but I think you said a third one. What was the third challenge that you'd mentioned?
well, I don't remember this is congruent with what we last mentioned, but you've just reminded me of one anyway. So it's
cool. Perfect. Stumbled on success again.
Right. This is what we're here for. But people fail to look at the whole picture of a candidate. And here's what I mean by that. I had a friend who was going to be a data analyst. He was getting interviewed to be a data analyst for a company. They set up the 3 or 4 interview process. He gets to interview number 4. And they say, we've decided that instead we really need somebody that has an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, okay, this is a job where you splice and dice Excel sheets. Like, I get it, but and so they're like, we're going to go in a different direction. We've decided that we have a different vision for the job. Okay, cool. Job gets reposted. It's the exact same job description, but they've added one thing, right?
What was the one thing?
Entrepreneurial spirit. And so,
but how do they define entrepreneurial spirit?
Exactly. And so, and not to mention, if you're interviewing people properly using a motivation-based interview, which I know you know well about, you're going to find somebody who has a strong bias for action, that thinks on their feet, which is what entrepreneurs do. So here's what this company is now going to do. They're over-focus, we have to get it right this time. We got to find that entrepreneurial spirit. And they will pay no attention to the rest of the skills that were defined in this job, or whether or not somebody's motivated to use them. And I know I mentioned earlier that skills aren't everything, but I meant that in the context of experience. You do need to have exposure to the right skill set, or at least have a natural proclivity towards the right skill set. You might not have used them in this industry or this type of a role before. But now this company is just looking for one thing, and they're going to be so disappointed because the person won't be able to do anything else in the job, and they'll be set up to fail, and it won't even be their fault. Or the other thing that I often see is that companies will tell people that they really want to dig into somebody's strengths and weaknesses, and as if they mean it. But then if you admit that you have a weakness, they over focus on that one thing. And it's like, look, nobody's perfect. You have to, do they have more strengths than weaknesses? When you look at your candidates as they're lined up, who has the biggest differential or biggest ratio between their strengths? Like who has the most spread, I guess, between their strengths and weaknesses, and go with them. But then a lot of times people will over focus on that one weakness of the 6 strengths and just get in their head that it will not work. They don't make the hire. They miss out on possibly the best available candidate at the time because they were focused on that one thing. And then they settle for somebody that's having 6 strengths and one weakness, sorry. They find somebody whose area that they were concerned about was now a strength, but now they've got 2 strengths and 5 weaknesses and they get a worse hire. Does that make sense?
It does. So the risk is we end up overcomplicating a lot of this stuff, right? So we start to think about what are the dimensions that we're making a decision. What are our decision criteria? What dimensions are we looking at the decision through? And then how are we going to evaluate whether or not the decision we made was a success or a failure? And if you use fluffy language like entrepreneurial spirit and struggle with defining what an entrepreneur is, and I think an entrepreneur is someone who thinks different so that they can do different and ultimately be different and create outsized impact. Now, you'll hear me say the same thing around leaders who think different, do different, and ultimately be different to create outsized impact. There are a number of different ways that you can cookie cutter your way into leadership. And what ends up happening there is you get into a situation where you bring on someone who thinks they're a great leader or is proclaimed as a great leader or has had whatever experience it is that you've gotten, but they have no idea how to lead themselves out of a wet paper bag. They don't know how to lead self well. They haven't earned the right to lead others. They might have the resume or the CV that says that they've demonstrated in a certain environment, but what you don't know is, are you dealing with someone who represents the Peter principle, which I believe the Peter principle is you get promoted up into the point of failure or something to that effect. So I'll have to go back in and find a link for that. But Tim, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the importance of assessing skills, knowing what skills need to happen and how you're going to actually assess those skills, having a process that's repeatable, that creates predictable results. I mean, that's the advantage of a process. And in the absence of a process, just start building one step at a time and testing against it, seeing what your results are, ones and zeros as you go through. Yes or no, did we advance? Did we not? And then we got into this last piece, which is, hey, sometimes we miss out because of a view that we might have on someone else or some categories that we start to put folks into. A lot of this sounds like leadership challenges.
Yeah. And it's all driven by mindset at the end of the day. I mean, I know it seems too simplistic, but somebody somewhere has a mindset that leads to insecurity, that leads to not being focused. And here we are, right? Here we are.
So one of the things we're working on, and I said it a little bit earlier, and you'll hear this more and more, and this is not, it's a giant, this is an advertisement for a capability, a problem that you see out in the marketplace that Tim and I believe and have a high level of confidence that we can help solve, both through Tim's experience in working with folks like Carol Quinn, and Carol's been on the podcast before. You can do a search for the podcast with Carol and hear her talk about motivation-based interviewing. The problem that we believe we've got an opportunity to help people solve for is building leadership capability inside your organization by bringing leaders who have a specific area of expertise into your organization in a fractional capacity. And if you think of fractions, just look at a pizza. There are 8 slices. Rather than having the whole pie, you get a slice of that pie and you can apply that slice of that pie inside your business. And how could that help you think different so that you can do different and ultimately be different as an organization? How can that help you level up the leaders inside your organization who maybe have some really interesting skills, but they don't have the same forward-thinking experience that someone else might be able to deliver? If that sounds interesting, take a look at both Tim and I, the place that I'd like you to go to first, or as a response to this podcast, is go to findmycatalyst.com/fractional. Findmycatalyst.com/fractional. That landing page will be up. It'll have some information about what we're working on. It'll actually have an assessment around assessing your readiness for a fractional leader inside your business. And this works in the context of ops, operations, finance, CFO, sales, marketing, success, CRO, CMO, CCO, Chief Commercial Officer. Works on the HR side.
CHRO? I was going to say CHRO.
CHRO works on the HR side. If you think about how you're building out people, works on the security side, CISO. So there are so many different areas that where you can start to apply this experience that exists out there in a fractional manner that will help you level up inside your business. And if you happen to be someone who is working as a fractional today, and you're interested in being part of the portfolio of folks that will be able to plug into organizations, let us know that as well. And on that side, I would just say send a direct message to Tim or me on LinkedIn. Tim, anything else to add?
No, I feel like anytime you ask me for that, I go in a million different directions. So I'm going to stop.
We'll work. We'll get better. Tim, we will get better. I will hold you accountable to getting better at this.
Right.
And one of the things you can hold me accountable to doing is better storytelling in the context of delivering information. Because as a friend of ours, Donald Forgione, had said to me recently, he said, look, there's no fluff with you. There's no filler. It's just straight and to the point, and let's get things moving along. Now, sometimes I'll add in a couple of extra words, but I'm more about action than bringing you along a journey so we can get from where we are to where we want to go, and everybody can engage and all of that other kind of stuff. And I'm working on getting better at the storytelling. I apply it in the work that I do from a guide perspective, leaning on some of the Donald Miller stuff and delivering a plan that leads to success and avoids failure. And that's one of the things that Tim and I can do. And you'll see some of Donald Miller's stuff in the language that we have on the website. So if you know of somebody who would find value in this, please share it with them. I will get better at storytelling. Tim will get better on staying on point. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking different about your process? Different about your process.